Well, thanks for joining us here. We third read the operating budget for fiscal year 2026 after perfecting it earlier in the week, and very proud of the product that House Republicans, the majority in the Missouri House, delivered for this budget. It's a balanced budget, as it should be, and as the people of Missouri expect and demand of us. And it's not only a balanced budget, it's a fiscally responsible budget, not just in this year being balanced, but it truly does set us up for success in the out years as well, beyond just fiscal year 2026, but looking even to fiscal year 2027 and beyond, making sure that we're working to make sure we have a trajectory that in the future will balance our ongoing expenses and obligations of the state and the things we know that are coming with what our ongoing revenues can assumably be projected to be. And not only is this $47.9 billion state operating budget one that is perhaps less than we've seen in recent years, and we're proud to have found savings and efficiencies across state government, we also continue to have really a historic surplus, although it is being drawn down, but still leaving $2 billion on the bottom line to make sure, again, back to that first part of this, that this will, continue to be a budget that is sound, not just this year, next year, but well into the future as well. So very proud of the entire Budget Committee, really members on both sides of the aisle. I'm very proud to be associated with my 5 subcommittee chairs and my vice chairman here. Appreciate so much the work that they did and the leadership they've provided throughout this process. And again, just incredibly proud of the product we put now sent to the Missouri Senate for their consideration, the historic investments we've made in education, in infrastructure, transportation, public safety, and happy to talk about any of those.
So the operating budget you just passed has about $900 million of general revenue more than the revenue projection for the coming fiscal year, and of course the capital budgets will increase the amount more that you're spending than current revenues. How can you call it a balanced budget if the actual spending isn't aligned with actual revenues?
Yeah, so I mean, this is not unlike we've seen in recent years, and just like with your own household budget, if you have a savings account, there's only a few things you can do with money. You can save it, you can invest it, you can spend it. State government, though, is not like your household in that we don't need a 401k, we don't need an endowment, we don't need an investment. We don't make anything. We don't have widgets coming off the assembly line. This is not the productive sector. We only have what we take from the people. And if we don't need it to deliver necessary services that the people are depending on, that they demand and require, then we shouldn't take it in the first place. So we certainly don't need to be saving it forever. So I think that's kind of off the table. Now, to make things work year in and year out, that's a little different conversation, and that's what we're talking about, making sure we're keeping enough back to make sure we keep the trains on the tracks. And so we need to spend that money, or we just need to give it back, which we're doing both of those things. We've cut taxes in the past. That's the other side of fiscal policy. And of course, there's talk of that even this year. And so we're doing both of those things. But it's just what becomes important is what you spend it on, and that you spend it just now like back to your household. If you have a savings account and you've grown that over time, maybe you're saving up to buy a new car. Well, you're not going to buy that car every year. So if it's a one-time expense, if it's building a new building, if it's making certain investments in infrastructure and road projects, we rebuild I-70, we're not going to do it again next year. And so those are the types of projects that we need to spend this surplus on, that we are spending this surplus on, and we've got to just be careful that we don't give in to the temptation of spending one-time dollars or a surplus on things that are intended to be ongoing, like rate increases and things of that nature.
So, follow up, how worried are you about what's going on in Washington and how that could impact the demands for general revenue and other state funds in this in the budget that you've just finished?
Look, it's something we've got to keep an eye on. Former Speaker of the House from my area, Senate President as well, Ron Richard, once said when he was up here, you can hear anything you want to hear in this building. I forget what context that was in, but I've often thought that to be true. We hear a lot of things. I don't worry too much about things I can't control, and there's a lot of talk in Missouri and D.C. I don't know what, if anything, is going to come to pass, but certainly if the federal government reduces their participation in any shared program that would require greater demand on general revenue, that would be incredibly challenging. Specifically within our Medicaid program, that was, if you recall, and feel free to pull the tape, the very reason I opposed things like Medicaid expansion was concerns about that FMAP rate and the 90-10 federal state match, and if that was ever reduced, it's just not sustainable. And I don't hope to be proved right in that regard, but there's no question it's a concern.
Can you speak on the decision not to include all the funding the governor requested for child care subsidies?
Yeah, happy to. And so just to be clear, there were really two things there that was talked about, requested as it relates to our child care subsidy program. This is a long existing program that the state provides support to those of lower incomes to help offset the cost of child care for working Missouri families. And they qualify and apply through the Department of Social Services, become eligible through that. With the creation of the Office of Childhood a few years ago, that's now been paid out of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And so part of that was prospective payment, as in paying at the beginning and not paying after the services have been rendered to providers. That was the smaller part, not talked about as much. The other part was paying on enrollment, more like is done with most private payers and individuals, versus right now the state pays on attendance. And so if the child is only there 4 days instead of 5 days, the state reimburses the provider for 4 days, not for 5 days. And the request or the idea was to use a federal funding source for that, which was an allowable use. The only problem is that was a one-time federal funding source that accrued a balance during the course of the pandemic, when pandemic dollars were used in lieu of this ongoing federal funding source, which is what allowed it to create this substantial cash balance, which does exist. My fear, and I think of the House position not having that reflected and just continuing with the existing program as it is that it would be next year a $160 million general revenue pickup. Well, just for example, the 1.6% CRE increase in general revenue we're projecting for FY26 is a $210 million increase in general revenue. Is the entire increase, and so that's $160 million. That was a concern as it relates to the sustainability, which is why we didn't move forward at this time. Having said that, we have invested heavily in this program the last few years, so I do think, and we'll make it clear, I believe that the House does value this program, as evidenced by really doubling some of the rates just in the past couple of years. It wasn't long ago, just a couple of years ago, infant and toddler, the rate was paying at 50% of what the market study would suggest. That's now at 100%. We've invested a few $100 million into this program to increase the rates we pay to try to stabilize this program. Of course, there's been problems with the payment with the new system at the department level, but frankly, that's a concern of mine as well, changing at this point in time after having just worked the kinks out of that system. As I said during perfection, it's not, unfortunately, as simple as flipping a switch and just starting to pay providers on enrollment versus attendance. That would take significant IT changes, and I'm worried it'd break the system again, and I think we probably need to take a pause and wait just a moment on that. And for me, frankly, I really never even got to the point of, is this good public policy? Is this bad? Is this a better idea? Is this a better way to do it or not? We really never even got past the fiscal concerns of, can we make this work year in and year out? And unfortunately, we just concluded we didn't feel like we were ready to move forward with that at this time.
What will this budget do for waiting times for beds at DMH or waiting times on DSS for service? What will people see next fiscal year?
Yeah, so we invested the Department of Social Services as far as an FSD, the Family Support Division, as far as making eligibility determinations for things like Medicaid, SNAP, the call centers. The department asked for about, I believe it was 50 FTE or so to try to scale that up. We removed that in the House for the personal service for state staff, and we changed that all to, not to get too technical, to E&E for contracting. To give them more flexibility, and felt like that would be a more appropriate and better use to lean on private contractors. And so providing resources there to try to help them scale up and meet the demand and the need. So I think that would provide for improvement of services and improvement of experience to Missourians trying to get those eligibility determinations made and access these programs and initiatives through the Department of Social Services. On the Department of Mental Health, we did provide substantial funding in the supplemental to eliminate any wait list that might currently exist or through the course of this fiscal year. For fiscal year 2026 specifically, we did provide an additional 1,500 slots in the DD program, which is not as many as was requested by the department, to be fair, but it is a significant expansion. And just the last few years, since about 2022 state fiscal year, we've increased that DD program slots by about 8,000. And so this is a program we've invested about $1.4 billion in that time, additional dollars. It's one of the fastest growing programs in the state. That's another one that frankly have some significant sustainability concerns around, and we're going to have to watch that pretty carefully.
In terms of the $50 million for private school, my understanding is that the current ESA program, there's like less than $20 million a year that's being used. Do you feel confident that all that $50 million is going to be able to be utilized? And if not, do you plan in future budget years to scale that back so it's more appropriate?
Well, I mean, it's challenging to predict the future, but look, you go back just a couple years ago, that program was at $5-6 million. I mean, it's still a new program in its infancy. In 727, we radically changed the eligibility criteria, as in expanding it. Unfortunately, the deals that had to be made to get that passed in the first place, from my vantage point, it was so limited, the applicability was not that great. And so it's now a statewide program. And if you look at the trajectory of where it's in just a few years, I mean, it looks like $50 million in my mind is very reasonable, especially with expanding it to statewide and expanding the eligibility. I would just push back a little bit. It's not just for eligibility to be used for private school tuition, although it is. Public school, charter school, homeschool type. I mean, there's various types of educational type initiatives that these scholarship dollars can be utilized for. But yeah, I think there's significant demand there and need. And I think $50 million is appropriate. But just like everything else, obviously, certainly, we will look at it next year and see if the demand meets the need and balance that with all the other obligations of state government. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's reporting today that the U.S. Department of Education sent letters to all K-12 agencies across the country, requiring them to comply with Trump's anti-DEI policies or risk federal funding, losing federal funding. How should Missouri's DESE respond to that letter?
I mean, I guess I'd just defer that to DESE. I haven't seen that letter. I'm not familiar with it. I mean, I think this body has made clear its views and beliefs on that topic and what's appropriate and what's not. And so I just probably can't comment anymore without having seen the letter.
Is that on your mind at all when you're thinking about the budget, DESE's funding?
Certainly, just as much as any other department. I mean, I think specifically as it relates to, DEI and those sorts of things. We had a conversation about that on the floor. There is some language that relates to House Bill 3 and higher education funding. And I think that, specifically as it relates to education, again, this body, from what I can tell, which I agree with, and I think the governor's made some comments, even in the state in that regard as well. We want to focus on, the ABCs, those types of letters, and education, K-12, level, reading, writing, arithmetic, at the higher education level, workforce development, and leave all this other stuff out of it. And you know, I think, again, this body's made pretty clearly its feelings on the issue and what's appropriate and what's not, and how tax dollars, you know, shouldn't be spent. Thank you.